my presentation will start with the purpose of the ex post. You all know this, I think, the lessons, some lessons from the midterm evaluation, our expectations and use. I will be quick on the first slides. So the purpose, you know that we have, for the previous programming period, we had a legal framework. You all know the Council Regulation 1698 of 2005, where the legislator says what we expect, in fact, from the ex post evaluation. We want to know the degree of utilization of resources, how much and how funds have been spent, of course, the effectiveness, the efficiency, the socio-economic impacts, also the impacts on the 6 community priorities. You probably remember these 6 community priorities: competitiveness, environment, quality of life, etc. Each program has its own goals, so we want, and these are specific, so we want to know how these goals have been achieved. The ex post should draw lessons. Draw lessons, you will see in our expectations, it's a very important feature, because Commission wants to know what we learn from the old programs, not only to draw lessons for the current ones, the 2014-20 programs, but we are already, I would not say speaking about, but we are already, each one of us, in the policy units, also in the evaluation unit, thinking about post-2020. And of course, there are factors of success or failure in program implementation that it's also important to show, including on the sustainability of results and impacts. Sustainability, it's very important, because if the policy is not sustainable, if the results and impacts achieved are not sustainable, we may have to change something. And then, of course, identifying good practice is always of information. Because good practice, I mean, mainly makes us learning about evaluation, about the policy, but also about evaluation itself. So it's also a learning tool. But of course, the purpose of the ex post comes also from the new common monitoring and evaluation system, because ex post evaluation guidelines were developed at a moment where the Commission, with the help of stakeholders, with the help of the evaluation help desk at the time, already were working already in the new framework for 2014-20. So we think that the ex post should also demonstrate the progress, the achievements of the programs, the relevance of the program, of course, results, impacts. This is, or it was already clear in the Council Regulation of 1698. One aspect important is that the ex post evaluation should contribute to a better targeting of support. And as I said, learning is very important, because we realize that it is still necessary to build capacity. I mean, I would not say even more and more, but it's still a need to build capacity in evaluation, to build evaluation culture. Because there are methodological limitations, there are challenges, as we will see today and tomorrow. And these make us learn how to better address these limitations. I will not speak too much about the lessons from the midterm evaluation. You have 2 slides where I tried from previous work of colleagues, not only in DG Agri, but also of the previous help desk. they have made a very thorough analysis of what was coming from the midterm evaluations, the limitations. Of course, many midterm evaluations were rather weak. This is not new for us due to a number of reasons. Maybe low expectations at the time. Maybe the managing authorities or some managing authorities did not give the necessary importance to the exercise because it came maybe too early in the programming period. There were also limited skills in the managing authorities, not so big budgets dedicated to the midterm evaluation. Problems with data, these you all know. There were also problems mainly with the assessment of impacts. Was it possible to assess impacts at that time? Maybe not. I will not read. You have in the slide. Of course, why do I show these two slides? It's to show you that Commission hopes that we have all learned with the midterm evaluation experience, and that now we can do better, of course. And that's why our expectations will probably seem very ambitious. So there are expectations regarding data, indicators, evaluation questions. Of course, we would like that now you have good data, quality data, collected in due time. Of course, maybe at the beginning, the monitoring systems, the collection of data was not optimal. We hope that during the ongoing evaluations, you were able to improve the situation. It's important to complement quantitative data with qualitative information. One important expectation is that baseline data used for the new programming period may also be used in the ex post. It's a possibility. In some cases, we think this is possible. You should use the full set of common indicators and the revised set of common evaluation questions. Why do I insist on this? I remember already 1 year ago, some member states turned to us, or even more than 1 year ago, in fact, some member states turned to us and said, could we use the old set of 150 common evaluation questions? And I said, you could, because the reason was that there were contracts ongoing with evaluators, and that evaluators were using the 150 common evaluation questions during the ongoing process. They used them for the midterm and then during the ongoing process. And now all of a sudden, we have to use the revised set. And I insisted that we should now, all of us, use the revised set. So we should forget the initial 150-something common evaluation questions. And of course, programs are different, have their own specificities, and it is also very important that you use program-specific indicators and program-specific evaluation questions so that common and specific can give us a real full picture of the impact of the program. We have also expectations regarding the methods. Of course, we will speak about methods today and tomorrow. I will not speak about one method or the other. I am not an expert on methods, far from that. You are much more able to speak about methods than me. But of course, independent of a specific method, we would like that ex post evaluations use really robust methods, be it quantitative or qualitative, or a mix, or mixed methods, but they should really be robust. The choice of the methods are very important because they can bring different, they can bring different methods may bring the same conclusion, but they can also bring different conclusions. So also this contradiction may be important. The triangulation of methods is extremely also important. And the use of counterfactuals, again, it's a must. Regarding the governance of funds, of course, if we use good data, good methods, we should have evidence-based findings, conclusions, and recommendations. These, I think, Sari tomorrow will say that for the Commission, this is for the analysis that the Commission will do of the ex post evaluation reports. This is a key element, because we need to have evidence-based findings, conclusions, and recommendations, and a very clear link between the three elements. It's also important to show the achievements of the programs at all territorial levels, regional, national, and EU level, even though we know that we need to keep a certain, we have to keep in mind proportionality, because some small program, asking a small program, a regional program, for example, in Italy or in other countries, to show how it contributed to an EU-level objective, it's not easy. So we are flexible there, but still this is the best that we should have. Of course, there are also expectations regarding communication of the evaluation. I put findings that is more evaluation results and impacts, because once the ex post finishes or it's concluded, you have to, as managing authority, you have to communicate what are the results of your evaluations. So bear in mind that the evaluation has to be communicable. You have to get clear messages. You have to get, the reports are usually big documents, sometimes not very interesting for stakeholders and the general, let alone the general public, who will probably never read a report. So you have to communicate the summary, the juice that comes out from your ex post. And it's very important, if you keep in mind, if you tell your evaluator, or for those of you who are evaluators, that you also communicate what this juice in a very interesting way, to get, to have a hook on people. Because if you just speak about, you have a very interesting finding, a very interesting result, but you speak about it in one page without taking the juice, maybe nobody will read, nobody will even understand what you are talking about. So try to pick really key messages that can show what you have achieved or what you have not achieved at all. Because it's also important to show what was planned but not achieved for a reason. The managing authorities should learn from the evaluation findings and be familiar with program outcomes. What I want to say with this is that the managing authority should have ownership of evaluation, should not see the evaluation as just a burden, as just the last piece of the closure of a program. We have to do also an evaluation. Now that the program is closed, Commission has paid what it has to pay us, and now we still have this to do. Don't take it like that. Take it as an exercise which is useful for you. And of course, bear in mind that the reports should be comparable and allow aggregation for the use. So ownership at the level of the managing authority, but then for the Commission, don't forget the famous synthesis. I will talk more about this after. Don't forget the synthesis of the evaluation reports that is under the responsibility of the Commission. The Commission will contract an evaluator, a team of evaluators to do this synthesis. So the reports should be comparable and aggregate, and they have to be aggregated. And to finish expectations, I would finish with this kind of summary to repeat that the Commission expects high-quality reports. You are encouraged to follow the ex-post guidelines, of course, produced by the Evaluation Help Desk. There is in the toolbox an indicative outline of the ex-post reports. Of course, the evaluations, like the guidelines, as any guidelines produced for the Commission, they are not mandatory. However, we would like that everybody follows the same outline, if possible, because it will also facilitate the aggregation afterwards, the synthesis. There is also in the toolbox a quality assessment grid for the managing authorities. Of course, it's not mandatory, but managing authorities are responsible. They are paying for the ex post. Of course, we Commission, we are contributing to this financing, but you are also contributing. So you are the ones at the first place who should be interested in having a good report. So if you want to see if the report that you get, you will not just get a final report, you get preliminary reports. So from the beginning, start looking at the quality of these reports. We also do evaluations at the Commission. We contract outside, of course. We don't do them ourselves. And we also use a similar quality assessment grid to assess from the first stages, from the preliminary stages, the quality of the evaluations. And I must tell you that I cannot give you a percentage, but I would not exaggerate if I tell you that first versions of reports we get, they are usually rejected. Rejected does not mean we ask the evaluator to make some changes. They are rejected. They are not paid for it. Until, of course, they don't improve. In the end, they will, of course, be paid. But when the report is of good quality, until then, it's not paid. I will not go into many details because Sari is the master for this tomorrow, but it's important that you know that once you send the reports to us, we will not put him in somewhere hidden. The desk officers, not my unit, unfortunately, we cannot read all the reports, but the desk officers will read the reports, and there will be a quality assessment tool developed by the Evaluation Help Desk to help the desk officers to look at these reports. There will be a training for the desk officers in autumn 2016, where Sari and the other colleagues of the Help Desk and myself, we will explain to the desk officers what is the ex post. They should know it by now, but a kind of reminding of also the expectations for the Commission of a good report, and we will also explain them the tool, and we will have a guidance for them how to fill in the tool. And in the end, after they fill in this assessment tool, it's like a checklist, managing authorities will receive from the Commission an observations letter in 2017. I am vague here because, it will depend when the reports will come. Probably for some at the beginning of the year, you will get the observations letter, because some reports are more advanced than others. Maybe some, I mean, Finland has finished, but maybe some member states will be a bit late. But in 2007, you will get also a clear, formal feedback from the Commission about your report. On the use, of course, the use of the ex post, it's not only a use, I mean, the reports are not only useful for the Commission. I want to be clear on this. The reports are also, as I also said when I was speaking about expectations, the reports are useful first of all for you, and then for the Commission, and then for the stakeholders, for the public, because this Commission more and more insists on transparency and accountability. You will see in my last slides, this is very important, the transparency and the accountability. Then it's a policy learning tool. You have to learn with the evaluation. The evaluators will also learn, I hope. The managing authorities will learn. The Commission will also learn. The other institutions of the EU will also learn, because don't forget that the Commission receives the reports, but then the synthesis, the results of the synthesis will go to the Parliament, to the Council of Ministers, to the Court of Auditors, and Court of Auditors of the European Union, even though maybe for you it's one of the least known institutions, it's an institution which is having more and more, they are looking more and more to what we do, and they are, I would not go to the point of saying more and more involved in policy, but they are influencing a lot the policy. Of course, you should see the ex post as an important tool to be used still in 2014 to 2020. I will not read, I have 5 minutes, and I want to have sufficient time for my last slides. So you have this here, it's clear for everybody. Use this as an important tool for this program that you are managing now, you managing authorities. And then there is also a use for the future, for the post-2020. The Commission Juncker, probably, this is linked now to the additional slides. Commission Juncker gives it gives importance from the beginning, and it's still giving and more importance to the evaluate first principle. You probably heard about better regulation agenda. Once the Commissioner Juncker got in place, one of the first initiatives was the better regulation agenda. And better regulation, you will see afterwards, better regulation means not only doing better regulations, better delegated acts, implementing acts. These are the new forms of legislation we have. It's not only that, it's that the whole policy cycle has to be better. So from the planning, and the planning is done by the Commission, from the planning of an initiative to the evaluation and to the revision of a policy. The whole policy cycle has to be better, but I will come to this. And the evaluate first principle is very important. Before the Commission launches an initiative, I don't know if you all know what is a green paper, when the Commission starts reflecting, we would like to have a policy on something. One of the possibilities is to draft what we call a green paper. It's just a discussion paper. It's a very preliminary stage. We have to have an impact assessment. It's not an assessment of the impact. It's the first stage, an impact assessment. What could be the impact on the EU, member states, regions, SMEs, the men on the street, the rural areas, the urban areas? If we do this, what will be the impact in the end? So that's why it's very important to have in mind this evaluate first principle. I will not read the rest. If you have questions, you can ask. This is more a repetition. Bear in mind the use of the ex post as an evaluation, as a capacity building tool. But now I come to what I like most, that initially I didn't want to put in my presentation, but then Hannes gave me the idea. With the risk of confusing some of you, I would like to speak a bit about this better regulation. I will not respect your 2 minutes. I will take maybe 5. This better regulation agenda, better regulation guidelines, what it is? It means that we want to design EU policies and laws so that they achieve their objectives at a minimum cost. That's just a repetition of what I said. So it's working at the level of the institutions, not only the Commission, because there is, initially it was, of course, an agenda launched by the Commission Juncker, but there is now, this was launched more than 1 year ago. In fact, 1 year, because we are celebrating the first year of the better regulation agenda. It was adopted, I think, end of June, beginning of July last year. So it's not new. Huh? However, it's only now, recently, a month ago, that there is an interinstitutional agreement between Commission, Parliament, Council about this better regulation agenda. Okay? But initially it was an agenda of the Commission. But we realized that if the Commission gives importance to better regulation, and then the Council and the Parliament, who are legislators, the Commission is not legislator, it launches, but then the legislator is elsewhere. So if the legislator does not follow the same principles, there is no point that the Commission does all this. So this better regulation means working in a way to ensure political decisions are prepared in an open, transparent manner, informed by the best available evidence and backed by involvement of stakeholders and citizens. This is explained after. So in fact, it covers the whole policy cycle, from planning, as I said, and preparation to adoption. So it starts when the Commission, the commissioners, the College of Commissioners start reflecting on something with the services. Then they start preparing a draft regulation, and then the commissioners, the 28 commissioners, adopt a proposal. So this better regulation starts much before the adoption by the college, by the commissioners. Then it continues being applied to the implementation and application. What does it mean? You know that there is a regulation, a basic regulation, adopted by the Council and the Parliament, in our case, in Common Agricultural Policy, and then there are delegated and implementing acts. It means that also delegated and implementing acts are covered by this better regulation. And then, of course, evaluation and revision. So the evaluation is put on an equal footing with the other stages of policy cycle. The Commission now says that evaluation is as important as any other stage of policy. Then, of course, let's see if in practice it will be the case. But this is the principle. Of course, the better regulation agenda guidelines, they do not apply to evaluations carried out by member states. That's why I was a bit hesitant in speaking about this, because don't think that if you go and Google better regulation guidelines, and you will see it's a huge document. The toolbox for these better regulation guidelines have, I think, 300 pages. It's for the Commission services to use. It's not for you to use. You don't have to. You only have to read it if you are interested in evaluation. If you are really passionate for evaluation, you can, because it gives you a really incredible overview, but it does not apply to you directly. But applies to the evaluations under the responsibility of the Commission. So, of course, it will apply to the synthesis of the ex post evaluations. So, if the ex post that you will give us are not of good quality, this may have a repercussion in the quality of the synthesis and ultimately in the, I would say, in the follow-up that the Commission will do about this synthesis, or the lessons that the Commission will take from this synthesis. So you have to be attentive to the quality of your reports. But which are the implications for the Commission? The Commission has to prepare an evaluation roadmap summarizing the design, purpose, and scope of the evaluation. So, the synthesis of the evaluation, the synthesis of the ex post evaluations have to be done by the end of next year, 2017. This means that already now, my unit has to prepare an evaluation roadmap. This is new. This is better regulation agenda. This never existed before. This is totally new for the Commission. We are learning by doing. We are just doing this already for some evaluations. We are doing an evaluation on greening, for example. We are already doing this. Not me personally, some colleagues of mine. And we will have to do this now for the synthesis. So it's a document where we have to say what we are going to do, ask what we are going to ask the contractor to do in this synthesis, what is the purpose, what is the scope of this synthesis. The evaluation must assess as a minimum effective, so the synthesis, I always say synthesis because for you to have an example in mind, but it applies to all evaluations carried out by the Commission or under Commission responsibility. We have to assess effectiveness, efficiency, relevance, coherence, and the EU added value. We want to see whether the policy, whether there is an EU added value or not. And this, believe me, it's one of the key points for the post-2020. We have to establish a consultation strategy identifying which stakeholders we are going to consult and how we will do this consultation, because now Commission has to organize a consultation of stakeholders and the general public. It will be an online consultation, an open internet consultation on the evaluation roadmap first, and then on the evaluation itself. So you will see next year on internet the Commission will launch 2 consultations about the synthesis of the ex post evaluation. One on the roadmap, and one once the contractor will be in the process or almost finishing its report, there will be a consultation about the main elements of this evaluation. And in the end, the situation before was that the Commission received a report from the contractor and that's it. This is finished. The Commission will receive a report and the Commission services, in fact my unit, has to take the report, the final one, or almost final, I mean, the draft final, have to draft what in our jargon at the Commission we call a staff working document. A staff working document means that it's a working document. It's a rather technical, I would say, document. It's not a policy document. It's a technical document where we will summarize the results of the evaluation process and we will take a position on the robustness of the evaluation process and of the findings. I would say even of the results of this evaluation. And if the Commission, DG Agri in this case, does not agree with something that the evaluator says, we will have now the possibility in this staff working document to say, Commission disagrees with this Of course, the evaluator is independent. He can say what he wants. But the Commission disagrees with this, and we have to explain why we disagree. But if we agree, we say we agree, of course. And another very important piece of the puzzle, I would say, because it's a puzzle, it's the quality control. There is now, for the first time, something similar existed in the past, but as with this name and with function, it's the first time. There is a regulatory scrutiny board. I will tell you, it's not in the slide, but I will tell you just for curiosity, what is this, how is it composed? This regulatory scrutiny board will, in the end of the process, scrutinize and quality control major evaluations, not all the evaluations of the Commission, only major. However, this beautiful regulatory scrutiny board, which just started working recently, has selected the synthesis of the ex post evaluation for quality control. So it means that these 6 or 7 persons, there is a chair, which is normally a Director General of the Commission. There will be 3 high-level officials selected from European Commission Directors General, and 3 persons, independent experts, selected from outside world. I don't have the names. They have been selected already, but it's 7 persons, in fact. So they will do a quality control of the synthesis, in this case, and of others, next year. And of course, the last part is the Commission has to look at the report of the evaluator, the staff work. When I say Commission, I mean the policy units. We'll have to look at all these, the report, the staff working document, the quality control, the results of this quality control of the scrutiny board, because the scrutiny board will issue an opinion, a reasoned opinion about the report. So we take all these and we will see which follow-up actions we need in order to feed in the future policy. Sorry, I didn't respect you at all, but you were
I realized this. I think it was very interesting also that you explained us how the ex-post evaluations conducted by the managing authorities at the program level interfere or are interlinked with the better regulation and the scrutiny process, which emphasizes the importance of this exercise to have common guidelines and to follow them. I might take a few questions on this, but only questions if not understood. You all have to be aware that we need to run through the schedule.
Yeah, my name is Franz Sinabel. I'm from the Austrian Institute of Economic Research, and I'm involved as a scientist in evaluation and have some practice. And I listened very carefully to your presentation on better regulation, because I looked at this, and this is really a very impressive piece of work. And now comes my practical question, because you outlined the process very well. Better regulation is where finally the judgments are made. And when we look at practical policies, they have been implemented in 2015, in 2014, they have been designed in 2012. The data sets that have been prepared and are currently updated are not yet prepared to meet the criteria you mentioned. So there is some inconsistency that we, and you certainly are aware of, because you have some benchmarks, and they cannot be met knowing what we know right now. And I'd like to know what your reflections are on this inconsistency.
Yeah, of course, your question is the question that we are asking ourselves. I don't know, I will not speak 5 minutes, and I don't know if I can even reply to your question, because this is the challenge for the Commission now. It's not only a challenge for us with the synthesis, we don't have only the synthesis, we have other evaluations. I spoke about the greening, but the difference is that the greening is already a policy designed for 2014. I mean, it comes in the new framework. The ex post comes from a different framework. However, don't bear in mind that we are learning by doing. This is our first evaluation in DG Agri where we will apply better regulation, and it's also the only one selected for the moment by the Regulatory Scrutiny Board. However, when we look at the criteria that the better regulation speaks of, and the criteria that we suppose the Regulatory Scrutiny Board will follow, they are, I will tell you what it is. I didn't want to put it in the slides, otherwise I would speak maybe 10 minutes more, but they are not so much different from the requirements which are already there and which I mentioned in my expectations, in the use that we have to do of the evaluation. The criteria are what? Comprehensiveness. Comprehensiveness I mentioned. It means that all evaluations have to assess effectiveness, efficiency, and all that. This, in any case, you have to do. It was already in the Council Regulation 1698. Proportionate. The evaluations have to be proportionate. It means that we will be flexible, that the scope and analysis must be tailored to the particular intervention or to the particular difficulties. I mentioned in my presentation that we will look differently to small programs compared to huge programs. Of course, you cannot apply the same level of detail of analysis to a program like Madeira or Azores in Portugal of some thousand euros with a program of 8 billion, like in Romania, for example. So we have to be proportionate. The evaluation has to be, I'm finishing, has to be independent and objective. The judgment of the evaluator has to be transparent. The evaluation has to be evidence-based. Is this new? This is not new. All this was there already. Maybe it was in a different format, but it was already there. But your question is extremely pertinent, but this is a challenge for us. We have to see with the first example whether applying better regulation guidelines to an evaluation of a programming period, of a policy designed back in 2006, it's possible, but which challenges will it bring? Which limitations will it bring? We will see.